Hey, Guy Haberman here. Welcome live on YouTube or not live or in the podcast feed, however you're consuming. If you're listening to the podcast, you can watch on YouTube in the description. If you're watching on YouTube, you can listen in podcast form. That link is down in the description as well. Before we get into anything, quickly want to address JJ Redick, who used Guy as a slur on Tuesday when he tweeted at Pat Beverly during some fight about something. Doc Rivers, I think, quote, "Pat, my guy, I had a 4-year offer with a player option, blah, 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 blah." My guy is not a bad word. My guy is a good word used between buds and budettes. So JJ, start using it properly. This morning, Wednesday morning, got up eagerly anticipating friend of the show, Tim Kawakami's mailbag, because I saw Tim tweet on Tuesday that he was going to predict, make his guess, not report, who the Niners' next defensive coordinator is going to be. So what did he write? This is what he wrote. My realistic guess, offered on a couple podcasts last week, are Gus Bradley, Colts DC, and Jets defensive coordinator Jeff Ulbrich. I'm not sure about either of their contractual situations, but I will continue to guess Ulbrich. Okay, first things first. Jeff Ulbrich's a guy whose name has come up a few times when we've had conversations about it. People have brought him up to me in streams and DMs and that sort of thing. He's the Jets defensive coordinator. My response when people have brought him up to me is, well, he's the Jets defensive coordinator. You can't make lateral moves in the NFL without your current employer letting you go. So what Kawakami is saying is, for whatever reason, he thinks there's some reason that just maybe the Jets might be amenable to letting him go. All right, interesting. On we go. More from what Tim wrote. Ulbrich, a former Niners linebacker, remains close with people inside the organization. He'd have the most motivation of those two to want the job. So he'd have the most motivation of those two to want the job. I mean, the Jet situation is a little hairy. So maybe he means that it feels like they're on the verge of getting fired. Maybe he means, well, he's from here. He's from Morgan Hill, played for the Niners his whole career. Okay, maybe it's about that. First line, remains close to many people in the organization. Think about the people who've been here since Jeff Ulbrich was drafted in the 3rd round back in 2000. Parag Marate, Jed York, people like that. So maybe he's always maintained those relationships. 10 years with the organization. Patrick Willis would seem to be a former teammate of his, maybe an advocate of his. Okay, on we go. More TK. Now Tim asked the most important question. Would the Jets let him make a lateral move? I don't know. But I think there would be momentum for this if the 49ers and Ulbrich want it to happen. One thing Tim wrote that I didn't read in here is he thinks the Niners are very motivated to get something done before the NFL Combine begins. And the Combine is next Thursday. The Combine is just about a week away. So he thinks the Niners want to get this cleaned up quickly. So when I read this, and Tim writes later in his article, this is not a report, this is a guess. This is my guess, but as we know, Tim makes educated guesses. Tim doesn't just throw stuff at the wall, despite some people wanting to dismiss every one of his opinions because maybe he blocked them one time. That's your prerogative, but I think you'd be missing out on somebody who has an idea what he's talking about. So I think that this is a very interesting part of this, right? Why would the Jets let him do this? And there's two reasons, and I don't know which one it is. I've been trying to read Jet stuff this morning and figure out exactly. On one hand, you'd be concerned. They don't want him. He's been their defensive coordinator for 3 years. This is a must-win season. It's the end of February, and they would just let him go? That would happen for one or two reasons. And we don't know the answer to which one it is. On one hand, major red flag. Why don't they want him? On the other hand, the other reason would be they really respect him. He has a chance to go back to the team that he played for, a chance to go back home where he grew up. a chance to be a defensive coordinator for an offensive head coach. Now, he is the defensive coordinator. You read all this Jet stuff. Jeff Ulbrich is the one doing the game plans. He's the DC. But being the DC for a defensive head coach is different than for an offensive head coach, even though Kyle does get involved. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Just like being an offensive coordinator. For an offensive head coach, you probably just have most times, a little less freedom than you do. Now, again, Kyle got involved this year, but Kyle doesn't want to be involved. Kyle doesn't want to be involved in the defense. Kyle doesn't want Fred Warner knocking on the door. Yo, coach, you got a second? Do you have 10 minutes? I want to talk to you about the defensive coordinator. I'm thinking maybe we move him from the booth to the field, even though he doesn't want to do it, right? Kyle doesn't want to do with that. People think Kyle wants to have his hand in all this. No, he drafted Jake Moody so he doesn't have to think about special teams. And he wants a defensive coordinator that lets him not think about defense. It's not the stuff he wants to think about. So we don't know the answer as to why would the Jets let this happen. But Tim clearly thinks there's a chance. And the other thing that I think you should read into this, or that I read into this, is that the Niners do want him, right? That if Jeff Ulbrich is not the Niners' choice, it may be because the Jets are keeping him, not because the Niners didn't want him. And it may be that's why that it hasn't happened yet, right? I think like most Niners searches, this one has no smoke, no reports of who's interviewing, no reports of they talked to so-and-so, they didn't talk to so-and-so, they haven't talked to Bill. That's the way these guys want to operate. I think that's a good thing. I'd love a bunch of rumors, from a content standpoint, but I think it's a good thing. And I think it may tell us if they've got some urgency and they're not hiring internal, that maybe another organization is the holdup. Maybe the Jets are the holdup here. One last thing here from Tim that I'll read. He goes on to say, Ulbrich is my guess, just a guess. I don't see Shanahan and Lynch going the big name former head coach route. So that eliminates Vrabel, Carroll, Belichick. Brandon Staley gets eliminated by that category. And I don't think that's what's happening now. Most likely it'll be somebody tied to the Seattle system. It'll be linebacker focused. Ulbrich checks that box, linebacker. And it'll be more of an up-and-comer than a legend grudgingly moving to an assistant's role. I think Ulbrich, if the contractual complications can be ironed out, is the likeliest candidate. I'm not reporting it, just guessing it. If not Ulbrich, maybe another Jeff Stafford, Marquand Manuel, or Texans linebackers coach Chris Kiffin. Those are two guys with much less coordinator experience than Ulbrich. They don't really check every box, although Manuel was the Falcons DC for 2 years. Former player, Kyle likes that, was a safety. Chris Kiffin was on the Niners staff for a couple of years as a pass rush specialist coach. He was a defensive coordinator one time back in 2017 at Florida Atlantic University, where I was surprised to find out they were 34th in the nation in points defensively. Also, Gus Bradley, I'll just mention the Colts were 28th each of the last 2 years in defensive points. So that's some of Ulbrich. Ulbrich, I did not view in the up-and-comer category, but there was a big article in The Athletic from a Jets writer a couple months ago about Jeff and why he's head coaching material and becoming the Niners DC. Maybe he's telling Robert Saleh, Robert, look, I want to be a head coach. Let me go be Cal's DC. That'll give me a shot. That's a really interesting dynamic. And ultimately, you don't want to keep a coach around. You don't want to keep anybody around that doesn't want to be around, right? They don't want to hold Jeff Ulbrich against his will, but he's also their defensive coordinator and it's late February. And maybe they've got an internal guy. Maybe they have an internal guy they want to promote. Maybe they have a guy that they're afraid they would lose next year if there is a next year. I don't really get the sense the Jets are thinking that way right now, right? It feels like they are, we'll see. It feels like they are all in on this year. They're desperate. I was just watching Mike Greenberg, who's tied in with the Jets, talking about how desperate they are on television. So odd dynamic. There's some logic to it. It wouldn't be a guy just leaving for anywhere. So there's some logic. You could understand they let him go, but they like him. But it's still odd. If you let a coach go at this point, you'd have to ask the question, why? Here's some of what was said about him in this article back in December by a Jets writer for The Athletic. I'll hit a few of these things. Ulbrich doesn't chew players out. His method's positive reinforcement. Not all coaches have that pedigree. Defensive aide Jermaine Johnson says he's just a real coach. He's done it. That's important to me. It's very easy to take what he says and apply it because I know he's done it. I don't see why he wouldn't be a head coach. I think everything good that comes from him, he deserves 100%. Okay. One of their defensive backs said, this is Tony Adams, not Jamal, said you can expect consistency out of Brick. Great nickname. Great nickname. You can expect consistency out of Brick. He does a great job teaching us, holding us accountable. Doesn't leave anybody out. I think you sometimes get coaches who don't care. He cares. For us as players, you could tell as a player the way we go out and play for him. It's not by accident. Look, the Jets have had very good defenses the last few years. Robert Saleh and their talent gets a lot of credit. But what the players are saying is you got to give Jeff Ulbrich some of that credit. They ranked 12th in points this year, 3rd in yards. Last year, 4th in points, 4th in yards. They were number 3 in defensive DVOA and 3 and 4 by a wide margin. The Niners were 4th in that category. So this would feel like if this were the hire, I don't know if safe pick would be the answer, but safer than some of the other guys that Kyle has hired, right? This is a huge hire for Kyle Shanahan. This is his 4th defensive coordinator hire. He nailed the first 2. The third one did not go well, in a sense. He didn't bring him back. So from that standpoint, it was a failure. But on one hand, it was a success. I mean, they're on the verge of winning the Super Bowl. If the offense makes one more play, then Steve Wilkes and that defense helped them earn a ring. And we're talking about what a great job they did on Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl. So even though I don't think he's scapegoating Steve Wilkes, I know some people disagree with that. And I think that even had they won the Super Bowl, they might have arrived at this conclusion. I also think it's a high-pressure hire for Kyle, right? If you're going to fire Steve Wilkes, a guy who's been around the NFL, everyone's familiar with Steve Wilkes. People respect Steve Wilkes. You're going to fire Steve Wilkes after your team goes to the Super Bowl. You play 5 quarters of Super Bowl football. You better get the next one right. And I was texting with a friend of the show, our buddy John Dickinson from KMBR. He's like, well, I should just have JD on and give his takes. He's like, but you can't just hire some guy who's never done it to replace Steve Wilkes and then not catch all of the heat if it doesn't go better. Because in theory, your talent might go down this year, right? You might be a little worse on defense, which we'll see. I don't know if Hufanga comes back. We'll see what their talent looks like. Better Bosa to start the season. So it's a good spot to be if you're a defensive coordinator. But I think when I read those Jets quotes to you, the reason I read those quotes is if this is the guy they hire, I think a lot's going to be made of how good he is with players. And you'll hear, like, there were some quotes in this article from Patrick Willis about what a great teammate what a great teammate he was for young Patrick comes in the league, and the veteran Ulbrich is there, and he's always building him up, right? So there's going to be a lot of that. And I think one of the questions will be, and I don't know they would answer this, but clearly there was a disconnect. And, we started getting the hints of it in the middle of the year between the way that Nick Bosa and Fred Warner, these are the guys you have to satisfy on defense, want to play, and the way Steve Wilkes wanted to play. And I think what you have to be careful of if you're Kyle Shanahan is then overcorrecting and hiring a defensive coordinator who will just do whatever your star players want to do, who will just be their buddy and not their coach. And the good news with Jeff Ulbrich, he's got a lot of NFL playing and coaching experience. And in an ideal world, Kyle will just go hands off. Ulbrich will do what he does. He'll take input from Warner and Bosa. He already does what they do, so there won't be a lot of static on the feedback loop because he's coming from Robert Saleh, and he's going to have a very clear sense of, what these players are used to, what they understand, what they like, how to put them in positions to succeed, that sort of thing. But there's a fine line that I think any coach who's coaching players who've had success, who are star players, who clearly have the ear of their head coach, right? Those guys, they have the ear of their head coach. There's a fine line between just doing whatever they want and maybe sometimes finding things that'll make them better and making them uncomfortable. And, it is incumbent on the players to be coachable. To go, okay, we'll try it your way. You want to try something? Let's try that. And I think Fred and Bosa did that. I think both those guys are really coachable. And so it should work out. It does seem like this year they gave it a shot. Wilkes will try it your way. They didn't like it. And then they said to Kyle, this has got to change. And they changed. So I do think those guys tried. And I think they'll probably be open-minded to being coached. But again, they'll be hearing things. If this is the guy, they'll be hearing things from him that they already, that they already like, they already agree with, that sort of thing. The other interesting thing to me about Ulbrich is that he's different than the other three coordinators the 49ers have had on defense from a personality standpoint. Robert Saleh, very outgoing, very demonstrative on the sidelines, but he's a stoic, kind of quieter leader. DeMeco Ryans, not as demonstrative on the sidelines, but I think it turned out very similar to Saleh, stoic. Steve Wilkes, definitely stoic, right? More stoic probably than those other two guys. Ulbrich is different than those three guys from a personality standpoint. He's he's more of a talker. Not that those guys didn't talk, but you mic him up, you're going to get different stuff than if you mic up Wilkes, DeMeco, and Saleh. Maybe those guys got mic'd up and I missed it. I'm sure they did. Surely DeMeco or Saleh got mic'd up once by the 49ers content team. And maybe I've forgotten it or maybe I missed it. So somebody sent it to me. Ulbrich I remember watching Hard Knocks, and this is what I said. I got to be transparent here. This is what I said early in the week. When somebody asked me about Ulbrich, I said, this is kind of different. When you watch Hard Knocks, Ulbrich is a different personality, and I wonder how well that melds. Here's a little bit, and by the way, I've had some audio issues when I play these videos the last few days, so I'm going to play it here in the YouTube live chat. Tell me if you're hearing it or not hearing it. But here we go. This is from the Jets. They mic'd up Ulbrich. They put it on their YouTube channel earlier this year, and here's just a taste of who he is and what he sounds like.
Man, that was the nastiest little shake route I've ever seen in my life. Hey, we need speed on this. You know what this is supposed to look like. You know what I'm saying? All those little details, they matter. They matter.
It's a lot of moving pieces.
But that's where MC gets not enough credit, because he does that all the time and never gets it wrong. His eyes are elite. What are you doing? I got to get my revenge on this flinch drill. I got hurt yesterday. It's a little tight. I'm back for revenge, though. He's not going to move me today. He's not good.
By the way, for those of you listening, I might edit this out of the podcast. That's the owner that Jeff Ulbrich just goes up to here in the middle of practice, right? So this is him mic'd up.
Revenge, though.
This is the owner. This is Woody Johnson. So when Kawakami writes, he has maintained relationships in the organization.
He's not going to move me today.
Smart. That's the man that signs the checks. The owner comes out to practice. You go shake his hand. All right, here we go. We'll continue on.
He's not good. He's not going to move me. Yeah, baby! I'm just waiting for my payback when this is all said and done. I want Mac. Damn. Are we just warming up? Yeah. Oh, I actually heard that one. Spence, I heard that.
We got a rematch right here. Rick said there is no chance you move him 1 yard back.
You ready?
Ready?
You
Let's go.
tried.
All right, here we go.
Oh, I tried.
So we're going this way.
Slide. Good. Perfect. And he's on that pivot. Good. Good. I'll tell you what, he has real juice. I mean, real juice. I saw him wiggle the other day. I was like, ooh, and then he bursts. Yikes. Oh, gotta get those. We finally scored. I can't breathe now. I'm out of breath. Steal that ball, mother. Pick the ball.
All right, so there's just a taste of Ulbrich. I don't know, taking a slice 2 minutes of somebody does not define them. I always wonder when you mic somebody up, are they more inclined to try and give you some content? But that was similar to the Hard Knock stuff. He's just it's a different personality from his defensive coordinator than he's had, and so the question would be, do they meld? Does it bother Kyle? Does it bother him to have a DC who's maybe a little more talkative? Talkative is not the word, but engages maybe a little bit differently. But I don't know the guy. You go read some of what was said about him. You hear some of what Patrick Willis said about him, and they say positive things. So anyway, there you go. That is some about him. Some questions about it from you guys. How can they hire him away from the Jets? The Jets have to cooperate. Richard on the stream says another puppet for Kyle. Big surprise. I believe Kyle doesn't want to puppet the defensive coordinator. Kyle doesn't even want to think about the defensive. Kyle does not want to be puppeting into the defensive meeting rooms. Kyle doesn't want to be talking to the coordinator about, I think you should move down to the field from the booth. Kyle doesn't want to do any of that stuff, which, by the way, I didn't think of it till just now. I'm pretty sure when I watch the Jets that Ulbrich is on the sideline. Let me just do a quick Google image search. Yeah, he's on the sideline during games. So already he fits with what those guys want. Tracy on the stream, he says, I'm not a flag-waving Kyle supporter, but most of the time I'm fine with everything he does. This would check a lot of boxes for Shanahan. Comment me out this piece says we need a DC who teaches discipline. Yeah, I mean that'd be very consistent with what Kyle wants. Rojo says this would be a horrendous hire. I'd love to hear more. D'Anthony says Gus Bradley turned down Kyle in 2017 before settling on Saleh. He had another opportunity in 21, but when Saleh left but didn't interview, doesn't seem like he's ever been interested in the 49ers. What did Ulbrich accomplish with the Jets? D, I'd like to know. I guess you could give the credit to Saleh. I mean, the defenses have been very good. I mean, they had awful quarterback play this year and somehow competed. Now, they did give up 37 or 38 points to Joe Flacco at the end of the year. But, on the balance of the season, they were very productive. Ulbrich, where did this go? This is Lily says Ulbrich is with Kyle and the Falcons for 2 years. Yeah, Ulbrich was the linebackers coach. He was with Jim Mora for a minute. I remember him from UCLA too, but he was a linebackers coach from 2015 to 2019 in Atlanta. So there's some continuity, you would say, there. Between those guys, you'd want Kyle to at least have some understanding. Hiring if you just said don't know the name of the guy, but you're hiring a sitting defensive coordinator from a top 5 defense in the NFL last year, that would be a positive, Comment from Spencer. SF loves heritage hires as well. I could not care less that he's from Morgan Hill. Like, that stuff plays well on, I don't know, wherever. I think it matters to people. It matters to the people involved. So I'm not saying it shouldn't matter to him, but I would never hire a guy because he's from the area. That works a little bit more in college. But even sometimes in college, I think it gets overdone. Question, Thomas. What about Chris Richard? He knows the system. I think he's the DB coach in Dallas. Will Blackman, who was on the show last week, played in the NFL. I work with him doing some college football games. He suggested Richard. He was in New Orleans for a couple of years. I do think he was with the Cowboys last year, but that was his suggestion. Seattle guy. I mean, you're doing the Seattle connection thing there, but Oh, one last quote from where did this go? From Ulbrich, I didn't get to from this article. Ulbrich had never let the idea of being an NFL head coach cross his mind before. He started to let it creep in. I'd be lying to you if I didn't say there's times when I've thought about it, Ulbrich said last week in December. So there's also that. Could you become a head coach? Would a third Niners defensive coordinator become a head coach? Maybe. It would take a little bit of a leap. Now, if he's the Niners DC, he'd be getting full credit for it, unlike in New York where you don't get, full credit for it. Robert Saleh gets a lot of the credit for their defense. But again, based on what I've read, without being in the building, it does seem like that guy is running the defense. Although I'm sure Saleh's got some deep input. The Freak says if Moody makes that extra point, we win the Super Bowl. I don't think so. I don't think it plays out that way necessarily. I mean, it might, but if Moody makes that extra point, then Kansas City tries to take the lead with a touchdown instead of kicking a field goal to tie, and then you're playing catch up. You're down 3. You kick you kick a field goal to tie it. They get the ball last in regulation, and then maybe their field goal wins it instead of tying it. So it's possible if Moody makes that extra point, the Niners win, but I can't say that definitively. I think there's too much butterfly effect there to know for sure. Yesterday, I did a video about what the Niners could expect in trade offers for Brandon Ayuk. And many of you watched that video, so thank you for that. And many of you commented on that video, so thank you for that. I went through the comments on that video this morning, picked out a few that I wanted to respond to, a few comments that I wanted to respond to. And the first one comes from Pimpin' is a non-contact sport 2096. Guess you had to add the 2096 because somebody already had Pimpin' is a non-contact sport as a YouTube handle. I don't care what anybody says. The content creators love this. News is good and no news is bad for content. So you're right about that. But this is not like Brandon Ayuk. Here's the other thing. Let's also not act like Brandon Ayuk is a non-story, a non-issue. We'll see. Brandon Ayuk may not show up without a contract. There's a ton of receivers right now that are in a weird spot. Mike Evans wanted an extension, didn't get it. Justin Jefferson, what's he going to get? Stephon Diggs, is he done in Buffalo? So there's a lot of just a ton of receiver news out there right now. And the Brandon Ayuk news is real news. And also, I enjoy talking about it. So yes, but it's legit. This was a comment from Ricardo in the comment section yesterday. He said, I think Antonio Pierce is looking to trade 13 to go up and get Jaden Daniels. Let's just say there's more of a history with Jaden Daniels than Ayuk coming from ASU. So that point is the Raiders aren't using the 13th pick on Brandon because they're going to need that 13th pick to get up and draft their quarterback. I think they're going to have to get up pretty high the way it's trending right now to get him. It does feel pretty crazy, right? To have Aiden O'Connell with Brandon Ayuk and Devontae Adams. I haven't done the full investigation on what it would take. The Raiders, the tough thing for the Raiders, they only have 1 second, they only have 1/3, they only have 1/4, they only have 1/5, they only have 1/6. So they'd probably, you're looking at trading 13 and maybe a 1 next year to get up to where New England at 3 might make sense. If they don't love any of the quarterbacks, then it would make sense for New England maybe to move back a little bit and, begin this rebuild. So can you get up to 3? Does getting the 3 guarantee a Jaden Daniels, or does Washington like him at 2? 4, Arizona not taking a quarterback. 5, the Chargers not taking a quarterback. 6, 7 could Giants and Titans. Falcons, Bears at 9, Jets at 10. Yeah, so I mean, there's going to be some competition now. Luckily, there's a lot of quarterbacks, but I think this is I think it's a good comment. I think it's a good point. And finally, this one was interesting on an Ayuk extension. The Chiseler asked Guy, "Hey, Guy, Can they pay Brandon Ayuk, and after a few years, when it's time to pay Brock, or before it's time to pay Brock, can they then trade Debo? Interesting question. Short answer, yes. The time to pay Brock will likely be this time next year. Coming off of the 2024 season, he'll have one more year under contract, and that's generally when you want to extend these guys. And if he's playing just as well as he played this year or better, then you're definitely going to want to bring him back, right? Now, he will be under contract for 2025, and if there is this belief in the NFL that he's some Shanahan creation, then you'd really have no problem getting into 2025, knowing that maybe he's not going to get the big free agent quarterback offers. You know, these quarterbacks never get to free agency, but he's not even getting those offers, knowing you could tag him. The tag for a quarterback this year is $36 million. So figure going into 2020, going into the 2026 season, you know, if you played out 2024, don't extend him, play him in 2025, I don't know, figure it'll be $41 million or $42 or $43 million, which would still 45 even, which in 2026 would definitely be, you know, not top 10 quarterback money. That'd be top 10 quarterback money now. Will be interesting to see what Tua gets. But let's just play out the scenario where he plays really well this year and they want to extend him, right? But they don't want to extend him for $55 million. I do think the Tua contract will be really interesting. The Niners are not going to want to pay. I think the odds are good that they're not going to want to pay him top of the quarterback market. They don't pay it. They don't do it. They don't put themselves in bad spots with quarterback contracts. So remember that. Anyway, that's not the question here. So let's just say they are entertaining some sort of Brock extension after next season, but it's not top of the quarterback market because it's an extension. And they're going to know that he's going to make $1 million in 2025. That's what he'll make, right? Or somewhere around there. And then they'll have the right to tag him the following year. They're not going to do that. We're not going to get there, but they could, right? They could hold that over him in a negotiation, and that's $40 million. So maybe they tell him, look, take $42 million over 4 years, whatever. Let's just say that's the conversation we're having. In 2025, Debo has a cap number of $24 million. But next year, Debo Samuel has a post-June 1 dead cap number of $6.6 million. Very palatable. You can take that. Whether it's a cut or a trade after June 1st, that's what his dead cap number would be. So the answer to the question, could you re-sign Ayuk, and then when it's around the time to give Brock Purdy a contract, could you trade Debo Samuel? Post June 1, palatable, even cut. We're just talking about what the numbers say. Now, Debo might restructure this offseason, which would change the math and change the dynamic there. 2, he may not be very tradable in a year. I don't know. We'll see. 3, you may not want to trade him. The flip side of that is you might still really like Debo Samuel next year. I know everybody is down on Debo right now, and I think it's a combination of the Super Bowl, the JT O'Sullivan Super Bowl breakdown, and the fact that it feels like they have to choose right now, that if Ayuk leaves, it'll be because they kept Debo Samuel, partly true, and that, you know, people are taking sides on Ayuk versus Debo. I don't think much has changed on Debo. Let's see how he comes back this offseason with Ayuk potentially holding out. All eyes will be on Debo Samuel to see how he responds to the Super Bowl loss. I'm going to zig when everybody else is zagging here because everybody's killing Debo right now off the Super Bowl. And as I said yesterday, and as some of you are new here, like very new, some of you got here yesterday, so welcome. Thank you. As I've been saying since camp, go balls, they throw one a practice to Debo. They don't hit. They don't hit him. So the fact that they didn't run a great route, catch a go ball on an all-pro nickel, Trent McDuffie, should not surprise anybody. And I'm not going to kill Debo for that at all. So anyway, everyone's down on him. I'll hold on the Debo stock at this moment. Maybe I'll buy a little. So that's that. Okay. That's that for those two conversations. A couple other things I wanted to say real quick as it relates to receivers. Somebody sent me a DM this morning and said, is Mike Evans going to go ring chasing with the Chiefs, and would that be bad? That would be bad. Mike Evans on the Chiefs would be bad. You just have the feeling that Kansas City is going to do something this offseason. Dramatic. They always do dramatic stuff. When you start winning at the level they start winning, you start getting people willing to take less money to come play for you. However, I don't think Mike Evans is going to be in that category. Now, Mike might go, maybe they find a way to pay Mike Evans, but Mike Evans is 30 years old, going to be 31 years old. So while he's past his prime, he's still a very good receiver. Mike Evans has made $110 million in his career, which on one hand is a lot of money. On the other hand, he wanted a big contract before this last season, and the Bucs didn't give. He actually made him like a trade. He made him like a ultimatum, like borderline trade demand. Now, as we know, he ended up playing on the contract that he had, but at $110 million career earnings, I think Mike Evans is looking at one more cash in. I don't think Mike Evans is looking at ring chase for cheap. And if the Chiefs need ring chase for cheap, then I don't think they're getting Mike Evans. Now, if they find a way to move stuff around and give Mike Evans a contract that he feels like is market value or close to it, then fine. You know, the market may be suppressed by a lot of receivers being available, not just in potential trades and free agency. T. Higgins is out there, but also in the draft. So, you know, maybe this is not people aren't paying a premium for receivers this year. We'll see. But I don't think Mike Evans looks at $110 million like, I've made my money. I think he looks at it like, that's my career earnings in 10 years. Dudes are getting $20 million more than that on 4-year contracts now. So I need to cash in again. I think Mike Evans is a contract away. And it does, you know, he projects to age well because of his size. He's not speed reliant. So I think he's thinking, I cash in here, then I get another deal. You know, maybe I cash in, they cut me after 3 years, and then that's my time to go ring chasing. I don't think this is that time. But doesn't mean he won't end up there, that they won't find a way. Another piece of news this morning was I flipped on ESPN, and I saw Micah Parsons screaming at Stephen A. Smith. They were playing clips from the Stephen A. Smith show, and Micah Parsons was doing his Skip Bayless. I mean, Micah wasn't just yelling for the sake of yelling. He was talking about how there's all these AFC quarterbacks, nobody's done anything, blah, 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 blah. And while I respect his media grind, I think it's weird. I love that Mike is out there doing his pod for him. That's cool. You should do your thing. But it's just another reminder that the Cowboys aren't going to find it. There's just always something a little off with them. Mike Zimmer's not going to walk in and start telling Micah Parsons, hey, Micah, you know what, man? I think we got to cut out the podcast during this season. That's not happening. I would encourage Mike Zimmer not even try it. But the Cowboys are just always making noise. And it's part of the reason why they maintain their spot as the number one brand in the sport and one of the top 3 brands in American sports, the Yankees, the Lakers. But it's not going to help them win championships. And I think it's just a continuation of all this stuff that is always Dallas. Jerry talks all the time. There's just always something. And I'd like to welcome you to, what is this going to be? Is this going to be year 4? Are we approaching year 4? Yeah, we're approaching year 4 of me saying that Mike McCarthy and the Cowboys can't win it. Can't win the big one. Can't win it all. And feeling pretty good. What was this? 20, 21, 22? 23. Oh, no, it's year 5. We're going into year 5. All right. I should go find it if I can. I don't know if I can, but I said it after the Cowboys' first game. After their first game. It was a Sunday under Mike McCarthy back in 2020. And We did a podcast. I believe it was the Rams. Let's check. Yep, Rams. They lost to the Rams in Mike McCarthy's first game, and I said, "Oh, they hired the wrong guy." And I've only been writer ever since, and I'm looking forward to year 5. I'm looking forward to year 5 of that. So fired up about it. And finally today, and when I say finally, I mean finally, Apple has released a score app for iPhone. Now, I've been an Apple owner since the OG first generation iPhone 1. I remember the day very clearly. I bought a BlackBerry, came back to my office where I worked at the time. That was 1430 ESPN radio in Fresno. And I said, check out my new BlackBerry. And my boss, Chris Pacheco, said, take it back. The new iPhone just came out and I'm buying it for you. So I took it back. I got the new iPhone. Since that day, I have not found a good score app. I don't know about you guys. I've used them all. I've used The Score. I've used ESPN. I've used Yahoo. I've used league apps. I've got the NFL app, the MLB app, the NBA app. None of them get it right. I don't know how none of them get it right. None of them get it right. None of them ever get it right. So I got to upgrade to iOS 17, I guess. I tried to download the new Apple app this morning and it didn't work because I don't have the new software. And then I'm going to try out the new Apple Score app, and I can't wait. Cannot wait. So I have high hopes that it'll give me everything I want. All I want from a Score app is exactly what I want when I want it. That's all I ask for. And I'm hoping that Apple can pull that off. Another comment from Michael. This is a great comment, Michael. Michael says, damn, last week all you guys talked about was Belichick. Well, yeah, there doesn't seem to be a lot going on there. Now, I guess in the case of Bill, we wouldn't really know until it happens because with the Niners, we don't know anything until it happens. I shouldn't say we don't know anything. But in the case of the defensive coordinator hire, there's no rumors. There's no nothing. But it does not feel like Bill is about to become the defensive coordinator of the 49ers or Vrabel. That'd be too bad. We tried. Okay. On that note, thanks for hanging out this Wednesday morning. I will be back. Actually, I'll be back later today, but I'll definitely be back Thursday morning live as well. I keep saying it because you guys keep jumping in here. These morning lives do well. There's a lot of you here. Hit that like button. People say to me, what are you going to do in the off season? What's the plan here on the channel? Are you going to keep doing content? As long as you keep watching it on YouTube, then yes. So the more you watch it, the more I do it. It's this cool little cycle. Same applies to the podcast. If you're listening to the podcast, you can go check out the YouTube. I've said that earlier. So I won't repeat what I said at the beginning. But anyway, thanks for being here today. We'll be back tomorrow. And maybe I will be back before that, actually. And remember, guy is not a mean thing to call somebody. We're going to change the game here. Use it. This is not boss. This is not Haas. This is not chief. This is guy. Hey, guy. You're a guy. Be that guy. My guy. And by the way, anybody can be a guy. Hey, guy. Right? Anybody. As long as you're cool. All right. On that note, I'm out for now. Thanks for hanging out. And talk to you soon. Later.